Welcome back to PHP and to week 6. This is part 2 of a 3-part screencast for the week 6 lectures. So if you have not watched part 1, which is the adding student data, please watch that screencast first and then proceed on to this one. In this screencast, I'm going to cover removing student data, and which is covered in chapter 17 of your book for the reading for this week. So we've created our add student.php script. We've modified our index page so we can have a link to it, to adding a student. So now what we want to do is create a web page to remove student data for our simple application. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to obviously need to add another script and we'll call it remove student.php. We'd like it to look like this. So when a student is selecting a student to be removed, it'd be nice to have a web page that comes up that gives all the information. So in this case, let's say we just added Maggie Simpson. Let's say we want to remove Maggie Simpson. So we want to know, is this the one we want to remove? So we put all the student details up there, and then we're going to give the user a choice. We're going to give them a nice red button that says delete student, or a green button that says don't delete student. Okay, so what we're going to want to do to allow a student to allow a user to delete the appropriate student, we want to add links with a trash can icon to the main student listing page as well, so we can select which student we need to delete. So here's the example right here. So when we hover over this, you're going to want to see that we're linking out to the script remove student.php, and we're going to send it a query parameter, and in this case we'll name it ID to delete, and that's going to be the primary key of which particular student that we are interested in deleting. Okay, now this isn't a super secure. So later on, we're going to talk about restricting the access for removing student data by adding administrative authentication. In fact, I think that will be when we cover adding user logins, which is quite a number of weeks away, I think. Let's see. Just going to go and look here. No, yep, that's the midterm exam. Week 9 is going to be the basic authentication. Week 10 is going to be security. And then I think it's week 11 that we're going to, week 11 we'll talk about adding user logins. Okay, so let's go back to where we were. Okay, so let's go ahead and get to the business of creating a script for removing student data. So if you click on this link, remove student, that will take you out to the notes for how we go ahead and do that. So before we create our remove student.php script, let's first add the removal links to our main student listing index PHP script. So if we go back over here, we can see this is where we want to add our little trash can icons. Okay. So heading back over to the lecture notes, we're going to want to use the Font Awesome trash can link. So the purpose of this link will be obvious. So to do that, we're going to need to include the Font Awesome style sheet in a link. And so you'll open up the index.php script, and you're going to add the following style sheet link just below the bootstrap style sheet and just above the title student listing line. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab this right here. Then I'm going to go over to the index page right here. And we're going to go ahead and add that link right here. And that looks like that's lined up really nicely. Save that. Head on back over to the lecture notes here. Okay, now what we want to do is we are going to add a column to our student listing table by adding a blank table head column. So that's this right here. And then we can add a data item for each student listing with a link to remove student.php and the ID of the student as a query parameter to the table row. So we'll name that query parameter ID to delete. Okay, so let me go ahead and grab this new column, this header right here, and we will go and find the table in our index page. It's going to be right here. So that's just below student name. Okay, and we're not putting any heading in that column. Okay, and then we'll go ahead and grab, I'm going to just grab this whole piece of code right here. Okay, so here's what we're doing. Right now, we're echoing out, if we go ahead and look here, we're echoing out the first and the last name, okay, in that first column. So that's what this is right here. We have an href to student details, and then we're concatenating the first and the last name. So we'll still do that, but then we're going to add this another table data item for an href to, here it is, remove student.php, and here's the query parameter, ID to delete, and then we're going to pass along the primary key, which is going to be in the row ID from the query that we did earlier. Okay, so let me just grab this whole piece of code right here. So here's the query right here. So we're querying for the ID, the first name, the last name. And then I'm going to scroll down, find that while loop, and I'm going to just paste this updated code right here, and then we'll indent that to pretty it up a little bit. And that should probably be, there we go, proper indentation. All right, so we'll save that. And then if I refresh, we see the trash can links right here. So if I hover over Maggie, you can see down here that I'm going to link out to remove student.php and send the query parameter ID to delete set to that student's ID. So you notice it changes when I hover on a different student. So that's what we want. Okay. So now we'll go ahead and we'll create the remove student.php script using our usual Bootstrap template. We'll set the title to remove student, and we're going to add a card for our content with a header for the title of the page. Okay, so this should all look familiar to you. Set the title to remove student, set an h1 tag to remove a student in the card body. Okay. Next thing what we want to do is we'll need access to the student database for the student we want to remove. So we're going to have to grab the DB connection credentials, and we'll connect to our database. Okay. So what I want to talk to you about right now is that there's actually multiple ways to navigate to this remove a student page. So let's head back over to the lecture notes so we can talk about this. Whoa. I'm actually on a local copyright over here. So let me take care of that. Hold on a second. So we'll head on back to the lecture notes to discuss the multiple ways that we can navigate to this remove a student script. So as you can see below, the page displays the student details of the student to remove along with two buttons. So this gives the user a choice to remove the student or not. So because this is a self-referencing page, when the user selects one of the buttons, for example, delete student or don't delete, the remove student.php script is called with the name attribute of the button selected. So these buttons have to have different name attributes. One's going to be delete student or something like that, and one's going to be don't delete. Okay. Yeah. So the student ID attribute is sent and parsed into the post superglobal array. So there are two other ways that a user can navigate to the remote student the remove student.php script. First is by selecting one of the trash can icon links for a student to remove from the index.php page. Another unintended mechanism would be to type remove student.php into the URL address bar of the browser. So that is without a query parameter containing the student ID. So let's head back to our remove student.php script and we'll see how we handle this. Okay, so we need to handle all of these possible methods of navigating to the remove student.php script. So first, we'll handle the expected ways of navigating to the remove student.php script, and then the unexpected ones. So the best way to deal with these choices is to create an if, else block of code. All right, so here's my connection. My connection to the database command. So I have my condition right here. If is set post delete student submission. So what's going to be in this conditional block is going to be what we do if the user selected the delete student button. Okay, so we'll have to delete it from the database, and then we'll link back to the main page. In this condition, else if the user selected do not delete the student submission. So in this particular case, the only thing we would do is link back to the index.php script of student listings. So in this particular one, notice that in this condition, we're actually looking for something in the get superglobal, whereas here it was from the post superglobal. So this is another good reason why in most cases your method attribute should be set to post in your forms as opposed to get. Okay, now there may be rare occasions where you set the attribute to get, the method to get, but in most cases it's going to be set to post. Okay, so again, these two conditions right here are going to be, hey, the user selected one of the buttons. In this particular case right here, the user selected the trash can ID, and we're going to go ahead and grab that ID. We're going to check to see if the ID was set. And in this code right here, we're going to display the appropriate student from the ID. We'll have to query it from the database, display it, and then display the form with the buttons. In fact, the only thing that the form really has in it is the buttons to delete or not delete. And then the last case is a catch-all for any unintended page link. So this is kind of a best practice here, is have your conditions that you expect up here, and then for your unexpected or your exceptions, have an else clause that catches everything else. So that's a great way to handle errors. So in this case, we're handling all of unintended links in this else block. In this particular case, we're just going to link back to the index page. Okay, I think that's what we're going to do. All right, so let's take the case where we're navigating from the trash can. So that's this else if right here. We're navigating. So the first intended way that we're going to navigate to the remove student.php script is when the user selects the trash can icon for a student that they want to delete. Okay, so we're dealing with the second else if block in this case. So they should be presented with a page like this. Okay, remove a student. We are asking the student to confirm deletion and giving the student details. So first display a deletion confirmation message using Bootstrap's text danger class. So notice that's making that red right here. Okay, so if we use text-danger as a class attribute, then any text inside is going to be red in that case. And so there's a whole bunch of different class attributes for the colors of script, the colors of text, etc. And you can check that out on the Bootstrap site. Okay, so that's the first thing that we're going to do is output that. Next, what we want to do is we want to grab the query parameter that holds the ID of the student that we want to delete from the get superglobal array. So with it, we can query the student listing table in the student database for the row of fields for the given student ID. Okay, so grab my ID, I'm putting a query string together, I'm just going to select everything from student listing where the ID equals what this ID is. I'll execute the query. Now I want to make sure I should get a single row back. Okay, so if I don't get a single row back, I'm just going to say, hey, I didn't find any student details. Okay. All right. So we'll get if we do get a row back, we're going to go ahead and fetch the results from the query base. Okay, and then we'll populate that in a variable called row. Then what we want to do is we're going to display the student in an H1 tag set and all the student details in a striped table. Okay, and you've seen what this looks like. So basically, here's the information that we're displaying to the student. Okay. Finally, we're going to display a form that self-references the remove student.php page with two submit buttons, one for deleting the student and another for not deleting it. Okay, so here's the form. Pretty simple. There's just two buttons in here. Okay, the delete student button and the don't delete student button. And I'm adding here, I want to make it red. So I'm adding button-danger. You can see there's a theme here, right? Because text-danger, button-danger. And then I want the other one in green saying do not delete, button-success. Okay, so notice above here that I created a hidden input element in the form and I set it to the ID of the student right here. Okay. After the form data is posted back to remove student.php when the user presses the delete student submit button. So the ID is available to our PHP script in the post super global array so that our code can delete it from the database. Okay, we have to do this because the web is stateless. So let me head back over to the lecture notes to sort of discuss this point about the web is stateless. All right, so I have that in all caps and an exclamation point. So what does that mean? It means when the user selects the delete student submit button, the action is to re-render the remove student.php script because it's self-referencing. And it will send new data to the page through the post super global array. However, all of the previous variable data from the PHP code as a result of the last navigation to remove student.php from the index.php page, it's gone. Okay, so you're going to run into this. You're going to forget what I'm saying right now about the web is stateless. It's like, wait, when you relink to yourself or you link to another page, all of your data, and you would think like in a self-referencing page, hey, I defined all this data. When you relink back to your page, you're starting over at the very beginning, and all of your variable data from the previous HTTP request, it's gone. Okay, so the definition of stateless behavior is that all data is communicated in a single HTTP request and response between the client, which is your browser, and the server. So this data is only present for the current HTTP request response transaction. Using a hidden variable in a form is one way to keep to keep information between transactions. So after linking to a different or the same page. In follow-on chapters, we'll talk about cookies and sessions, and we'll explore other techniques that we can use to persist data as a user navigates between pages in our application. In our application. So the problem is with the web being stateless is we cannot persist data between transactions in a variable unless we use something like hidden variables, which is really not very secure. We can use cookies, we can use sessions, or we can use sessions which are more secure. Cookies are not very secure either because they're on the client browser. And we can use the database. So let's head back to our remove student.php script and we'll see what happens when we delete the student. Okay, so pressing the delete student button is the second intended way for a user to arrive at the remove student.php page. So therefore, we are dealing with the if block. That's the first block up in that if else block. Okay, so we want to check to see, is the delete student submission button set, and is that ID set as well, which we set in the hidden variable. So when we reach this condition, it was because a user selected the delete student submit button. The browser then sends a post request to remove student.php with the form variables delete student submission and the ID in the post superglobal array. So in this block, we delete the student with the given ID from the student listing table in the student database. Then we link back to the main student's index.php page, the main student listing. Okay, so here I'm grabbing the ID. I'm creating my query, delete from student listing where ID is equal to that ID. I'm going to execute the query, and then I'm going to go ahead and link back. So that's what this function does right here, header location. This is talked about in the book. So this will link back to the index page. Okay. So notice that once our code runs, the removed student is no longer listed in the main page. That's what we want to happen. I'll demonstrate that in a bit here. Okay, so pressing the don't delete button. So pressing the don't delete button is the third intended way to navigate to the remove student.php page. Therefore, we're dealing with the first else if block. Okay, I think it's the first else if block, do not delete. See, now I've got to go up here and check that out. Yep, it's the first one. Okay, so if this condition is true, it was because a user selected the don't delete submit button. Doing so posts to remove student.php with the form variables do not delete student submission in the post super global array. That's really all we're looking for. So in this particular case, there's really nothing we've got to do except for linking back to the index.php script. And I have right here a link to the header function, which I probably should have put right up here as well, but whatever. So if you want to know more about how the header function works, click on this link right here and it'll send you to the manual. So we send a location with the destination URL index.php. Okay, so when the page reloads, you will notice that we did not remove the entry that we had navigated to remove. Okay, now we'll talk about unexpected navigation methods. So since the HTTP request is coming from the client, in theory, unanticipated or unwanted and malicious parameters can be in the query string. All other conditions we could navigate to the remove student.php PHP page are unintended. So we took care of the ones that we intend first. So it's great at this point to have an else clause. Hey, did I get here from some other mechanism? Okay, so in this particular case, all above conditions are where we want the application to function in a specific way. It is a common practice to put the application's response to unpredictable behavior in an else condition. In this case, we redirect to the main student index.php page. Okay, and that's all we do. So here's the complete code listing. So I'm going to go ahead and grab that. This is everything we just talked about. Not a super long script. And I'm going to go to the VM. I will create a new script, paste this in, save it as, I'm in the right folder, remove student.php. There we go. So if I select on Maggie Simpson right here to remove her, I will get the expected confirmation message with all of her information. If I say don't delete, I will go back to the page and not delete Maggie's entry. If I, let's go and delete, go ahead and delete her. If I do delete her, I'm going to go right back and you'll see that it's no longer in the database. If I go and navigate to remove student.php, you'll see that I'm going to get sent right back to the index page. So that's exactly how we want this to behave. So that is the end of this part 2 for the week 6 screencast for removing a student. I will see you in part 3 where we will edit the student data.